Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, once the 3-day attorney review period begins, that's when the buyer's deposit is due, which is the escrow. So the title company will hold money in escrow. So if the buyers and the sellers don't come to a meeting of the minds during the inspection period, the buyers do get their deposit money back, and we just put it back in the market. If the buyer doesn't, if they lose their jobs, or if they back out, or if due to some mortgage issue, then they also get their deposit back. So it's really just if the buyers back out for any reason outside of inspections and outside of the mortgage, then the sellers do get to keep that deposit money. Okay, so the mortgage comes, so aside from the inspection, so, typically we will come to a meeting of the minds there and we'll move forward. Their mortgage company will also send out an appraiser. So this is what Matt was talking about, about an appraisal. So the mortgage company requires an appraisal to ensure that the value that the buyer is under contract for that house is at or under the appraised value. We come up with an issue if the appraised value is lower than the amount that they're under contract for, which we are seeing happen more often because of the bidding situation. Typically, a listing agent is going to price a property based on the comparables and what they believe it should sell for in this market. But if a buyer comes in and says, "Forget about that, I want it. I'm going to pay $20,000 more than what you're asking," well, then we're probably going to have an appraisal problem. It's probably not going to appraise because we priced it fairly based on what we are seeing that has sold. And so if the appraised value comes in lower than the amount they're under contract for, we may need to renegotiate. However, again, my favorite term today, in this market, that is something that we are actually negotiating prior to even accepting an offer. So again, in addition to the buyer agreeing to waive a certain amount of inspection repairs, a buyer is oftentimes agreeing to pay the difference up to a certain amount of money in the event of a low appraisal. So if it appraises at 300, if we're under contract at 350,000, but the appraisal comes in at 340,000, if the buyers agreed to come up with up to $10,000 in cash to pay the difference, because that's all, the mortgage company doesn't care if you come up with cash. They just want to make sure that the amount that they're lending you, you're not, over your head before you even sign the papers. So they are okay with it if you come up with a difference in cash. So you have to agree to that up front if you're going in crazy, because essentially it doesn't matter if you say, "I have to have this house, I'm going to offer, $50,000 more than the asking price," but you're not agreeing to pay the difference if it doesn't appraise, then what's the point? Then the price is inevitably going to come down anyway, because you're not agreeing to pay the difference. So you as in the buyer. So it's a little bit of a complicated process now, but ultimately in this market, if it doesn't appraise, the buyers more than likely are just going to pay you the difference because they want the house that badly. But in a more balanced market, if it does not appraise, we can go either way. The buyer can, will negotiate at the time that it doesn't appraise, not beforehand. So we'll say, okay, well, it didn't appraise. So which we do, the buyer, the seller may stand firm and say, "No, I want my price." So maybe the buyer at that point is forced to come up with the difference, or they back out of the contract and keep their deposit money. Or you agree to split the difference. If it's a $10,000 difference, maybe you come down on your price by $5,000 and the buyer comes up with $5,000 in cash, and then you've met in the middle. So again, it's just another opportunity for negotiation if it does not appraise. But all of this is happening once we sign the contract. So we have the deposit money comes in, the inspections happen, the appraisal happens, and title. So the buyer will also hire a title company to ensure that there's no liens or open mortgages on the property. If there is, we will work with them to ensure that everything is closed out prior to settlement so that we can transfer the property in free and clear, essentially. We'll ensure the mortgage is paid off if there is one. The deed is prepared and all the required paperwork is provided prior to closing. The one thing the seller is going to be responsible for obtaining typically is the certificate of occupancy from the municipality, from the township. So all municipalities have different requirements on what they're looking for when they come through to do their inspection. It is a fee for the inspection, and then of course you're responsible for any repairs needed in order to be compliant. Typically what we are seeing townships ask for are fire safety measures, which is making sure there's a fire extinguisher that's the proper size. If smoke detectors are installed in proper locations and that they're functioning, carbon monoxides, things like that. So we will provide a compliance checklist once a contract has been signed. But those are really the big items to note. I did pack a lot of information into step 8. Step 8 is obviously the longest part of the process here. It's from when you go under contract, pretty much getting everything done. All of these deadlines that are being met are being fulfilled. And again, a good listing agent is going to ensure that you're meeting all of those deadlines, fulfilling those requirements, and ensuring a quick and seamless transaction so that we can celebrate at the closing table. Any questions specifically about this process? If you can go ahead and type them in. I did see Erin had a great question. Can you use the same agent to sell and buy? Yes, absolutely. And you should. You should feel comfortable with your listing agent, especially because they need to work very closely with you. And the listing agent of the house that you're purchasing. So they need to be up to date on exactly what is happening on your sell side, so that they can properly structure and make the transaction of the buy side seamless. It honestly gets complicated if there is 2 agents involved on the buy and the sell. In my 6.5 years, I've had it one time, and it was honestly that I had the listing, and then they ended up using a family member that got their license in the middle of the process to be on the buy side, and it really was complicated. It was kind of almost too many cooks in the kitchen type of thing. But if you end up going that route, it's just an extra step. It's a lot of communication. Everybody has to be on the same page. But and again, as you're interviewing agents, there are some listing agents who only list, but they have a team, and then they'll give you one of their buyer's agents to work with on the buy side. So it just depends. Every agent, every team has a different structure. For me, it is just me. I do the listings. I do have an agent that I have as a showing assistant, and she helps me in the event I cannot be present for a showing, but you are primarily getting me. And I only really had to do that because in this market, you have to see a house right away. And I never wanted to put anyone in a position to potentially lose out on a home because I physically wasn't present on a weekend or, a particular weekend that maybe I had something else planned. And I don't want that to jeopardize their ability to get that house. So I hired someone to help fill in for me if I wasn't able to be present. But then, once the showing works out, it doesn't work out, it comes right back to me to structure the offer and then continue with the transaction if it gets accepted. So, okay. So again, any questions on this, feel free to type it in. Before we go into general questions, I again wanted to thank you for being here. I hope you learned something today. I truly am a big believer that knowledge is